Okay, my name's Theresa, my company's Mooch, and I'm an artist. And the picture we have in front of us is a sculpture that I did in Memorial Park in West Ham, which is in East London. And it tells the story of the site on which it stands. And the site it's sitting in, Memorial Park, was once the training ground for West Ham United. And this is a picture of them in, I think, the 30s, 20s, 30s. There's some spats down there as a clue. But these guys originally were the works football team for the Thames Iron Works, which was one of the biggest shipyards in the country. And of course, the tools of their trade were of the riveting gangs who built these steel ships were hammers, which is where they get their name from, not because it's West Ham. And this is a picture from the museum in Docklands. It shows some of the artefacts that come out of the sort of history of the Docklands. And so, not only were they sort of, embedded in that site as they used to sort of kick a football around and turn professional in 1904, there also is a connection with the shipyard itself and the fact that they built this steamship called HMS Albion, and this is at the launch in 1898. Excuse me. And when it was launched at high tide, it caused a tidal wave so enormous that many of the people who were in the wrong place on the edges of the river were sucked in, and 38 people died that day. And so this local tragedy was marked in a small way in the cemetery, which abuts the park, and it was called Memorial Park because of this event. And so the history of the site is quite a mixed one and has got a number of stories that sort of weave into it. But I wanted to use also the history of the Albion, and so I went down to the National Maritime Museum and managed to get hold of the Admiralty drawing of the Albion. And I used the shape of the deck as a sort of pattern for the way that the sculpture would be laid out. And so there are 11 3-meter-high steel hammers in the sculpture that follow this pattern of the deck, which is the first point that hit the water and caused this terrible event. And so you get a sense here of the shape of the ship and the 11 hammers based out on the HMS Albion at 1-to-1 scale. And attached to each of the hammers is a 2-meter, a plate, is a 2-meter-long steel hammer. And it's kinetic, so it moves. So you can actually strike the hammer against the plate. And here we've got the riveting detail at the base here, with the pivoting mechanism in the bottom. And so that's the point at which it sort of starts to move and makes that sort of striking sound. This came about when I was doing the historical research. I came across a sentence that was so kind of sad. It said, the sound of the riveting gangs of East London is gone forever, and so I wanted to kind of, in some way, bring that back. And so that's the way that I've managed to weave the history of this work and this memorial sculpture in with the site and West Ham United. And in fact, the hammers are taken directly from West Ham United's logo. Excuse me. The luxury of a sip of water in one of these, it must be a rare thing. And so here again you get a sense of its place and the backdrop of Canary Wharf. And then it was while I was working on this project that I was approached by Electronic Arts, who are based here in Guildford, to work on a project for them to deliver some artwork as part of their planning agreement with Guildford Borough Council. And so I started my research into the history of the site on which they stand, which is in Onslow Street, and started to look at the history of the flood and what was going on at that time. And it was obviously a market town with a sort of rural backbone. But also, when I was at the History Centre over in Woking, I came across an article that appeared in the Lady magazine called The Guildford Guy Riots. And I was quite fascinated by this. And I went up to the woman at the desk and said, "Can you tell me a bit more about this?" He said, "Oh, well, yes, this is the closest this rather genteel county has ever come to proper insurrection." I thought, what, Guildford? And so this led me on to explore a bit more deeply. And I found this publication by a local historian called Gavin Morgan, who's a Guildford chap who's written this excellent book on the subject. And it sort of maps the history of Guildford as it sort of changed from this rural market-based community into something that's far more of a satellite of London. And here is a picture of the High Street at the height of what the Guildford guys used to do. They were a bonfire society, not an uncommon thing, but they used to have these riotous parties on the 5th of November loved and hated in equal measure. I mean, just an absolute blast. They would drag anything else, shove it on the bonfire, let off fireworks, and go and, you know, hassle someone who they think had been sort of naughty over the year. I mean, obviously, this tradition goes back, you know, a very long way and has been going on in sort of towns like Guildford for, you know, quite some time. But the Guildford guys took it to a sort of another level, and it was basically, as Guildford got more and more straight-laced, it was squashed by the authorities as this wasn't acceptable behaviour. But of course, we've still got a reminder of this in Lewes, and this is Bonfire Night in Lewes last November 2010. And I've been there several times, and I love it, and I think it's, you know, it's a fantastic community event, and it's a really wild way of getting everyone together and having a blast. And obviously, you know, a family event and something that is very much a part of the community. And the focus of it, again, is the bonfire. And this is the bonfire at the end of the procession down at Lewes last year. And so the artwork was kind of pushing in the direction of being a bonfire. And so that was the concept that I was starting to work towards. And so, where am I? Oh, I'm there. Oops, Daisy. So we started to look at locations, and obviously the Guildford Law Courts are just around the corner from the EA site, which is like pretty handy. And you know, what can we do to sort of place it there, almost under the eyes of the law that, you know, prevailed and squashed the guys in the 1860s. And so the great location. And also just in front of the Law Courts was this rather desperate roundabout. And so what we're hoping to do is to put a bonfire onto this roundabout sometime over. We're literally going to planning at the moment. So, and on that note, as this little slide changes, I can give you. So this is. And as it's on the roundabout, the fact that you're moving kind of animates the piece, and so creates a sort of shimmer through the sort of fence centre there, and gives the flames looking up around the empty chair at the top a sense of movement. So it's really just kind of this is literally just starting to go into planning now. So that's an opportunity to get people's thoughts and reactions to it. I mean, for me, this is a celebration of a very, very bumptious Guildford. The thing that you don't think Guildford is all about, and at one time it absolutely was. And so, feedback, please.